The shadow on Blood Mountain. Have you ever seen something moving through the darkness, without making a single sound? No footsteps. No breathing. No rustling leaves. Just a towering shadow gliding silently between the trees as if it never touched the ground at all. According to an old legend surrounding Blood Mountain in the North Georgia wilderness, there is a giant figure that appears only after midnight, when the fog settles over the trails. Locals say no one knows what it really is, and no one dares to speak its name. They all share the same warning: if you ever see its face, you won't live to tell the story. By sunrise, you'll simply be gone. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're fascinated by chilling horror stories, forgotten legends, unexplained disappearances, and terrifying mysteries that blur the line between folklore and reality, then you've come to the right place. Tonight, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself for one of the darkest legends ever whispered in the Appalachian Mountains. This is the story of the shadow on Blood Mountain. Blood Mountain has always carried an unsettling reputation. Rising above the forests of northern Georgia, it is one of the most famous peaks along the Appalachian Trail. While thousands of hikers visit the mountain every year, many locals avoid its trails after sunset. Officially, they blame the dangerous terrain, poor visibility, and unpredictable weather. Unofficially, however, there is another reason, one that has been passed down through generations but rarely spoken aloud. Long before modern hiking trails existed, Native American tribes fought a brutal battle on these slopes. Legends claim the ground became soaked with blood, giving the mountain its haunting name. Some believe the violence left behind more than history. They say something ancient awakened beneath the mountain, something that has never truly left. Strange reports have continued for decades. Experienced hikers have described hearing complete silence in the middle of the forest, where even insects suddenly stop making noise. Others have reported seeing impossible shadows standing among the trees before vanishing into thick fog. Rangers have quietly dismissed these stories as tricks of the light, exhaustion, or vivid imaginations. Yet disappearances continue to happen, and not every missing person is ever found. In the autumn of 2019, four experienced friends decided to spend a night hiking Blood Mountain. Ethan, Lucas, Maya, and Ryan had climbed difficult mountains before and considered themselves well prepared for any challenge nature could offer. None of them believed in ghost stories or supernatural legends. To them, Blood Mountain was simply another destination, another adventure waiting to be filmed for Ryan's growing outdoor YouTube channel. The trail was peaceful as they began their climb in the late afternoon. Golden leaves drifted gently through the cool mountain air, and sunlight filtered between towering oak trees. Everything felt ordinary. They laughed together, took photographs, and joked about the eerie stories they had read online before arriving. Ryan even promised his audience that he would debunk every creepy myth surrounding the mountain. As evening settled across the forest, the atmosphere slowly changed. The air became noticeably colder than the weather forecast had predicted. A dense layer of fog crept silently between the trees, swallowing the trail behind them. Their flashlight beams struggled to cut through the growing mist, revealing only fragments of the path ahead. The deeper they walked, the quieter the forest became. Birds disappeared. Crickets fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. At first, nobody wanted to acknowledge it. Then Ethan realized something that made his stomach tighten. The forest had become completely silent. Not naturally quiet. Completely silent. No insects. No distant animals. No leaves moving overhead. Nothing. It was as if every living creature had fled from something they could not yet see. Ryan attempted to break the tension by filming the fog-covered trees, joking that the atmosphere was perfect for a horror movie. As he slowly panned his camera toward a line of pine trees, he suddenly stopped talking. There. His voice came out barely above a whisper. The others followed the direction of his camera. At first they saw nothing except shifting fog. Then, far ahead between the trees, a massive black figure slowly emerged. It stood impossibly tall, far taller than any human. Its body appeared darker than the surrounding darkness itself, almost absorbing the light from their flashlights. For several long seconds, it remained perfectly still before drifting behind another cluster of trees. Not walking. Not running. Gliding. There were no footsteps. No snapping branches. No sound of movement whatsoever. The enormous figure moved across the forest floor without disturbing a single leaf. Lucas laughed nervously, insisting it had to be a trick of the fog or an oddly shaped tree. Maya wasn't convinced. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the place where the figure had disappeared. Something deep inside him screamed that whatever they had just seen was not an illusion. Still, they continued hiking. An hour later, after losing their GPS signal and watching their compass spin aimlessly in circles, they decided to set up a temporary campsite beside a large boulder. Ryan reviewed the footage he had recorded, hoping to capture a better look at the mysterious shape. At first, everything appeared normal. Then the shadow entered the frame. This time, the camera revealed something none of them had noticed with their own eyes. The figure wasn't taking steps. Its legs never moved. Its body remained perfectly upright while it drifted silently over the ground, as though gravity simply did not apply to it. No one spoke. Ryan replayed the clip several times. Each viewing made the footage even more disturbing. Suddenly, the video froze. Static flooded the screen. White lines flickered across the display. For a fraction of a second, a single image appeared. A face. Its skin was unnaturally pale, stretched thin over an impossibly long skull. Its eyes were nothing but endless black voids, and its mouth split almost from ear to ear in a grotesque smile that no human anatomy could ever produce. Ryan instinctively dropped the camera. At that exact moment, the campfire died. Not gradually. Not because of the wind. It simply went out. Darkness swallowed the campsite. And with it came the silence once again. A silence so complete that each of them could hear the pounding of their own heartbeat echoing inside their ears. Then Maya whispered 4 words that none of them would ever forget. "It's standing behind us." For several seconds, no one moved. The words hung in the cold night air like a curse that had finally been spoken aloud. Ethan felt every muscle in his body tighten as a wave of icy fear crawled up his spine. Slowly, almost against his own will, he turned his head. Nothing. Behind them stood only darkness and a wall of drifting fog illuminated by the weak beam of his flashlight. The trees stood motionless, their twisted branches reaching into the mist like skeletal hands. There was no towering figure. No glowing eyes. No sound. Ryan forced out a nervous laugh. "See? There's nothing there." His voice trembled despite his attempt to sound confident. Maya didn't answer. She kept staring beyond the campsite as if she had noticed something the others couldn't see. Her breathing became shallow, and her flashlight shook uncontrollably in her hand. I know what I saw," she whispered. "It was standing right there." Lucas grabbed another piece of firewood and struggled to relight the campfire. The lighter sparked several times before finally catching. A small flame flickered to life, pushing back the darkness just enough to reveal their exhausted faces. "No more ghost stories," Lucas muttered. "We're tired, we're cold, and this mountain is getting inside our heads." No one argued. Deep down, they all wanted to believe he was right. The fire slowly grew stronger, casting dancing shadows across the surrounding trees. As the warmth returned, the tension eased just enough for Ryan to pick up his camera again. He wanted to review the footage one last time before blaming everything on exhaustion. The memory card loaded. The final recording began. It showed the 4 of them standing around the campfire only moments earlier. Ryan could hear their own voices laughing in the background. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Then the camera angle shifted slightly. Behind Ethan, something stood at the edge of the firelight. A silhouette nearly twice the height of the tallest tree nearby. It was completely motionless. The others had been facing away from it. Only the camera had seen it. Ryan paused the video. His mouth went dry. He slowly zoomed in on the shadow. The image became blurry. Pixelated. Distorted. Yet one horrifying detail remained perfectly clear. The figure had no face. Where its features should have been, there was only an endless darkness that seemed to absorb the camera's light. "What is that?" Lucas whispered. Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he advanced the recording frame by frame. The shadow remained perfectly still for several seconds. Then, without warning, its head turned. Not toward the camera. Toward Ryan. A violent burst of static exploded from the camera speaker. Everyone flinched. The screen went black. When the picture returned only 2 seconds later, the figure was gone. Ryan lowered the camera. "No." He quickly rewound the footage. The shadow appeared again. He replayed it. Frame by frame. Each time the same thing happened. The figure stood silently behind Ethan. Its head turned. The screen filled with static. Then it vanished. "There has to be someone messing with us," Lucas said, though he no longer sounded convinced. Before anyone could respond, a distant sound echoed through the forest. Knock. A single sharp knock against wood. All four heads turned toward the trees. Silence. Several seconds passed. Then, knock. This time it came from another direction. Closer. The sound was strangely deliberate, as though someone was striking the trunk of a tree with enormous force. Knock. Again. From behind them. Then another. And another. Within moments the entire forest seemed alive with the rhythmic knocking of unseen hands striking ancient trees from every direction. The echoes surrounded the campsite. None of them could determine where the sounds originated. Ryan instinctively pointed his flashlight toward the nearest trees. Nothing. Only fog. Only darkness. Only the endless rows of towering trunks disappearing into the night. The knocking stopped. Complete silence returned. Ethan looked at his watch. The digital display blinked erratically before going completely blank. Lucas checked his phone. No signal. No time. No battery indicator. The screen simply displayed a single line of distorted white text. "Don't look up." Lucas frowned. What kind of glitch is this? He restarted the phone. The message remained. Ryan checked his own device. The exact same words filled the screen. Maya slowly reached for her phone with trembling fingers. She never had the chance to unlock it. Something heavy exhaled above them. A deep, impossibly slow breath drifted through the branches overhead. Everyone froze. Another breath. Long. Wet. Close. No one dared raise their flashlight. No one dared move. Every instinct screamed at them to run. But an even stronger instinct whispered something else. "Don't look up." The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then, somewhere high above the campsite, a branch bent under an enormous weight. Not breaking. Just bending. As though something impossibly massive had crouched among the treetops, watching them from the darkness. A single dead leaf drifted down through the beam of Ethan's flashlight. Then another. And another. Finally, something else began falling. A thick, black liquid splashed onto the ground beside the fire. Ryan slowly reached toward it with a trembling finger. It wasn't rain. It wasn't mud. It was warm. And it smelled unmistakably like fresh blood. Before anyone could react, a deafening crack echoed through the forest as the massive branch above them snapped in half. Something enormous dropped from the canopy. But instead of crashing onto the ground, the sound simply disappeared halfway down, swallowed by the impossible silence that had returned to Blood Mountain. None of them screamed. Fear had reached a point where it no longer produced panic. It produced paralysis. The broken branch still swayed above them, creaking softly in the cold wind, but whatever had fallen from the canopy had vanished before it ever reached the forest floor. It was as though the darkness itself had swallowed it. Ethan tightened his grip on his flashlight until his knuckles turned white. Every instinct told him to run, yet every step deeper into the forest felt like walking straight into the jaws of something ancient. Then, without warning, Ryan's camera switched itself back on. The red recording light blinked once. Twice. Then remained steady. "No," Ryan whispered. I turned it off. The LCD screen glowed against the darkness, automatically focusing on the line of trees beyond the campsite. At first, the image showed nothing except drifting fog. Then the autofocus adjusted. Figures. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Human-shaped silhouettes stood silently between the trees, each one separated by only a few feet. None of them moved. None of them appeared to breathe. They simply watched from beyond the reach of the firelight. Ryan instinctively lowered the camera. The forest was empty. He raised it again. The figures had moved closer. His breathing became ragged. "Don't," Ethan said quietly. "Don't lower the camera." Ryan frowned. "What? If they're only visible through the lens?" No one finished the sentence. Ryan kept filming. With every passing second the silhouettes drifted nearer, never walking, never lifting their feet. They floated silently over roots and fallen branches as though the ground held no meaning to them. The camera's microphone remained strangely quiet. There were no footsteps, no rustling leaves, not even the sound of the wind. Only static. Soft at first. Then growing louder. The screen flickered. One silhouette slowly separated itself from the others. It was taller. Much taller. The same towering shadow they had seen earlier. Unlike the smaller figures, this one did not stop at the edge of the trees. It continued forward. Closer. Closer. Ryan's breathing echoed through the speaker. 30 feet away. 20. 15. The figure's outline became unnaturally clear despite the thick fog surrounding it. Its arms hung far below its knees, impossibly long and unnaturally thin. Its body seemed wrapped in darkness rather than clothing, and every movement caused the surrounding mist to curl inward as if being pulled toward it. Then the camera emitted a sharp electronic tone. A rectangular box appeared on the screen. Face detected. Ryan's blood froze. There isn't a face. He stared at the message in disbelief. The autofocus box remained locked onto the figure's head even though all he could see was darkness. Another message appeared beneath it. Identity match found. Everyone leaned closer. The name slowly appeared across the bottom of the display. Ryan Carter. Ryan's lips parted. What? The figure standing in front of them had somehow been identified as him. No. He shook his head violently. This isn't funny. The camera suddenly produced another burst of static before displaying a live image unlike anything Ryan was recording. It showed daylight. The same campsite. Police tape surrounded the area. Search and rescue officers walked through the trees carrying equipment. A yellow evidence marker rested beside the fire pit. One ranger knelt near the ground while another quietly removed something from beneath a silver emergency blanket. Ryan stared at the screen in disbelief. That? His voice cracked. That's this place. The timestamp in the corner caught Ethan's attention. October 17th. Exactly 1 year in the future. The footage continued playing. A sheriff removed his hat. Another officer silently shook his head. Then the camera slowly zoomed toward the object beneath the emergency blanket. A pale hand slipped into view. On one finger rested a scratched silver ring. Ryan looked down at his own hand. The same ring. The same scratch. Before anyone could process what they were seeing, the image dissolved into static once again. The camera powered itself off. No matter how many times Ryan pressed the power button, it refused to respond. Lucas grabbed him by the shoulder. We're leaving. Nobody argued. They threw what little equipment they could carry into their backpacks, abandoning the rest beside the dying campfire. Maps, cookware, sleeping bags, none of it mattered anymore. They only wanted to find the trail. The four of them hurried into the darkness, following what Ethan believed was the correct direction back toward the parking area. For nearly 20 minutes they walked in silence. The fog remained impossibly thick. Every tree looked identical. Every rock seemed familiar. Finally, Maya stopped walking. Didn't we pass this already? Everyone looked ahead. Their abandoned campsite stood before them. The fire was still burning exactly as they had left it. Ryan's broken camera rested on the same log. Their backpacks, the ones they had just carried for nearly 20 minutes, were still lying on the ground where they had packed them. Lucas slowly turned in a complete circle. That's impossible. Ethan checked the compass. The needle spun endlessly. They tried another direction. 30 minutes later, the same campsite. Another direction. Again. The same clearing. It was as if Blood Mountain had folded in on itself, trapping them inside a circle with no beginning and no end. Then Maya noticed something none of the others had seen. Fresh footprints. Large. Bare. Pressed deeply into the damp earth around the campsite. Each print measured nearly 3 feet long. There was only one unsettling detail. They did not lead into the clearing. They did not lead out of it. Every single footprint simply appeared. One after another. As though something enormous had materialized in the middle of the campsite. Stood there watching them. And then disappeared without ever taking another step. No one dared step closer to the footprints. They stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, their flashlights trembling as pale beams swept across the impossible impressions pressed into the damp earth. Each footprint was perfectly formed, every toe clearly visible, every ridge unnaturally sharp, as though whatever had made them possessed tremendous weight. Yet there was one terrifying contradiction. There was no trail. The prints did not approach the campsite. They did not leave it. They simply began in the center of the clearing and ended only a few feet away, as though something enormous had appeared out of thin air, stood silently among them while they slept beside the fire, and then vanished without taking another step. Ryan slowly crouched beside the nearest impression. Against every instinct screaming inside his mind, he reached out and touched the edge of the print. The soil was warm. Not slightly warm. It felt as though the earth itself had been heated from beneath. He jerked his hand away immediately. That's impossible. Before anyone could answer, a faint vibration traveled through the ground. It was so subtle that Ethan first mistook it for exhaustion. Then it came again. A slow, rhythmic pulse. Almost like the heartbeat of something buried deep beneath the mountain. Thump. Silence. Thump. Silence. With every pulse, tiny pebbles rolled across the ground. The surface beneath their boots trembled just enough to make the hanging lantern sway gently from the branch where they had left it. Maya looked toward the forest. "Do you hear that?" No one answered. Because they weren't hearing it. They were feeling it. The heartbeat continued, impossibly slow, impossibly deep, vibrating through the roots beneath their feet as if the entire mountain had become alive. Then the heartbeat stopped. The silence that followed felt even worse. Ryan's flashlight flickered once before stabilizing again. Its beam landed on a nearby oak tree. Something had been carved into the bark. Fresh cuts. Deep. Violent. 4 vertical marks. Directly beneath them appeared a sentence, scratched into the wood with impossible precision. "You were not the first." Lucas stepped backward. "Who did this?" The cuts looked fresh enough that sap still leaked from the trunk. Ethan examined the surrounding trees. His stomach dropped. Every tree around the clearing carried similar markings. Some displayed names. Others showed dates. Most had been weathered by years of rain and snow, their carved letters barely visible beneath layers of moss. Ryan brushed dirt away from the base of one trunk. A date emerged. 1987. Another tree. 1994. Another. 2008. Another. 2016. Dozens of years. Dozens of names. Dozens of carvings. Every one of them appeared to have been left by different hands. Then Maya found one that looked brand new. Its bark was still damp where it had been cut. She raised her flashlight. The name stared back at her. Ethan Miller. Ethan felt his blood run cold. His name. Perfectly carved. Every letter identical to his driver's license. Below it was today's date. Nobody had spoken. Nobody breathed. Lucas searched another tree. His face lost all color. "My name?" Ryan hurried to another trunk. There it was. His own name. Maya turned toward the last untouched tree. She already knew what she would find before the light reached it. 4 trees. 4 names. All carved recently. As though someone had known they would arrive long before they ever stepped onto the mountain. Then Ethan noticed something even stranger. There was empty space beneath each name. Enough room for one final line. But those lines had not yet been carved. A sudden gust of icy wind rushed through the clearing. Every flashlight dimmed simultaneously. The fog thickened until the trees became little more than gray silhouettes. Somewhere in the distance, a voice softly called Ethan's name. Ethan. The voice sounded exactly like his mother. Gentle. Warm. Impossible. His mother had died 3 years earlier. He closed his eyes. No. Again. Ethan. Closer this time. It came from somewhere beyond the trees. Lucas stiffened. He had heard something too. A little girl laughed somewhere behind the fog. His younger sister. She had drowned when they were children. Ryan suddenly whispered, "Dad?" His father had been dead for almost a decade. Maya covered her ears as tears streamed down her face. Someone was singing. The lullaby her grandmother used to sing every night before she passed away. The forest had become filled with familiar voices. Not shouting. Not screaming. Calling gently. Lovingly. Each voice invited them deeper into the darkness. "Come here. We've been waiting. It's safe now." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. "They're not real." No one moved. The voices continued. Closer. More convincing. More human. Then another sound entered the chorus. Footsteps. Not around them. Behind them. Real footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Crunch. For the first time since entering Blood Mountain, something was actually walking. The sound echoed once. Then again. Crunch. 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 Each step seemed impossibly heavy, crushing branches and stones beneath an enormous weight. The four friends turned together. Their flashlights swept across the clearing. Nothing. Only drifting fog. Yet the footsteps continued. Closer. Crunch. Closer. Crunch. Closer. Ryan realized something that made every hair on his body stand on end. The footsteps stopped whenever their lights pointed forward. The moment they looked away, they resumed. Whatever was approaching them moved only when it could not be seen. Ethan swallowed hard. Nobody. His voice barely escaped his throat. Look away. For several agonizing seconds, all four of them kept their lights fixed on the same patch of fog. The footsteps ceased. Silence returned. Ryan's arms began to ache from holding the flashlight steady. His eyes watered. He blinked. Just once. When he opened them again, a towering black silhouette stood less than 10 feet away. It had crossed the clearing without making a single sound. Its impossibly long arms hung motionless at its sides. Its head remained lowered, hiding its face beneath an unnatural curtain of darkness. The air around it shimmered as though reality itself bent in its presence. Then, with agonizing slowness, the figure began to lift its head. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. Every instinct screamed at them to close their eyes. Yet none of them could move. The towering figure continued to raise its head with agonizing slowness, as though it understood that anticipation was far more terrifying than revelation. The surrounding fog no longer drifted with the wind. Instead, it spiraled inward, wrapping itself around the creature's body like living smoke. The temperature dropped so rapidly that Ethan could see his own breath freezing in front of him. Then the figure stopped. Its head remained tilted just enough that its face was still hidden beneath an unnatural veil of darkness. Almost as if it were waiting. Waiting for one of them to make the first mistake. Ryan's flashlight began to shake violently. I can't, he whispered. My hands. His fingers had gone numb. The beam slowly dipped toward the ground. No, Ethan hissed. Keep the light on it. Ryan forced the flashlight upward again, but his arms felt impossibly heavy. Every second they stared at the creature, an overwhelming pressure settled inside their minds. It was not pain. It was something stranger, an invisible weight pressing against their thoughts, urging them to blink, to look away, to surrender. Lucas suddenly gasped. Do you hear that? At first, Ethan heard nothing. Then, beneath the silence, a faint whisper emerged. Not from the forest. Not from the creature. From inside his own head. One voice became two. 2 became 10. 10 became hundreds. The whispers overlapped until they formed an endless chorus speaking in dozens of languages at once. He couldn't understand the words, yet somehow he knew they were all saying the same thing. Look at me. The command repeated over and over until it drowned out every other sound. Ryan dropped to one knee, clutching his head. Make it stop? Blood trickled from his nose. Maya stumbled backward, covering her ears, but the whispers only grew louder. They weren't entering through sound anymore. They were blooming directly inside her thoughts. Lucas squeezed his eyes shut. The whispers ceased immediately. For one brief second, relief washed over him. Then curiosity crept in. A dangerous curiosity. What if the face wasn't real? What if they had imagined everything? What if opening his eyes would prove there was nothing standing in front of them at all? The thought didn't feel like his own. It slid into his mind as smoothly as water flowing downhill. Open your eyes. Just for a second. Lucas fought the urge. His fingernails dug into his palms until they bled. No. Open your eyes. You're safe. Open them. Slowly. Almost against his own will. His eyelids began to lift. Lucas. Maya screamed. He stopped. Barely. The sound of her voice shattered whatever invisible influence had been tightening around his mind. He collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily. His voice trembled. I almost looked. The towering figure still hadn't moved. It remained perfectly still, waiting with impossible patience. Then Ethan noticed something impossible. Its shadow. The creature stood directly in front of them, illuminated by 4 separate flashlight beams. Yet its shadow stretched in the wrong direction. Instead of falling behind it, the shadow slowly crawled toward them across the ground. It moved independently, like thick black liquid spreading over the forest floor. The darkness reached the nearest footprint and paused. Then it slipped inside. Instantly, the enormous footprint filled with darkness so deep it resembled a hole opening into the earth itself. Another footprint. Another. One by one, every impossible track surrounding the clearing became filled with living shadow. The ground trembled. Not violently. Rhythmically. Thump. The heartbeat had returned. Thump. This time it was stronger. The trees shook with each pulse. Dead leaves rained from the branches. Tiny cracks appeared in the earth beneath their boots. Ryan looked down. The shadow inside the footprints was moving. Not swirling. Not flowing. Rising. Long black tendrils slowly emerged from each footprint like fingers pushing upward through water. They stretched across the forest floor, silently searching until they touched one another. The shadows connected. A massive circle formed around the campsite. Ethan's chest tightened. "We're trapped." As if responding to his words, the circle ignited, not with fire, but with darkness. Everything beyond its edge disappeared. The trees. The rocks. The mountain itself. Gone. The world outside the circle had been swallowed by an endless black void. Only the clearing remained. Only the four of them. Only the towering figure. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out the small folding knife he always carried while hiking. His hands trembled as he opened the blade. Without warning, the knife twisted violently. The metal bent inward with a deafening screech. Not broken. Bent. As though squeezed by invisible hands possessing impossible strength. Ryan dropped it immediately. The twisted blade struck the ground with a dull clang. The creature never moved. It didn't have to. Reality itself seemed to warp around its presence. Then Maya noticed something behind the figure. Another silhouette. Smaller. Then another. And another. Dozens of human shapes slowly emerged from the surrounding darkness, their faces hidden, their movements silent. They formed a wide circle around the clearing, each standing perfectly still with their heads lowered. Their clothes looked old. Some wore modern hiking gear. Others wore faded jackets from decades past. One appeared to be dressed in clothing from another century entirely. All of them shared one disturbing detail. Every figure stood with its face hidden. As though none of them dared raise their heads. Ryan stared at the nearest silhouette. Something about the man's backpack looked familiar. The color. The torn shoulder strap. The faded hiking patch. Then he remembered. A missing person poster. He had seen that exact backpack in a ranger station earlier that afternoon. The hiker had disappeared 7 years ago. Officially. Unofficially. He had never left Blood Mountain. The silent figures began to move. Not toward the creature. Toward the four friends. Each took one slow step. Crunch. The sound echoed through the clearing. Another step. Crunch. Another. Unlike the towering shadow, these figures produced footsteps. Real footsteps. Heavy. Human. Hundreds of feet advancing together in perfect rhythm. The ground vibrated beneath them. Closer. 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 Then every one of the silent figures stopped at exactly the same moment. Their heads slowly began to rise. Not toward the towering shadow. Toward Ethan, Ryan, Lucas, and Maya. And for the first time that night, Ethan realized the greatest danger might not be the creature that had haunted the mountain for centuries. It might be the people who had already looked into its face. The first of the silent figures lifted its head completely. Its face was unmistakably human. A middle-aged man with pale skin, hollow eyes, and an expression frozen somewhere between terror and acceptance. The backpack on his shoulders matched the one from the missing person poster Ryan had seen earlier that day. For a brief moment, the man looked almost alive. Then his eyes met Ryan's. His lips parted ever so slightly. "Don't." It was barely a whisper. "Look." Before Ryan could react, every other figure raised its head as well. Some were young. Some were old. Some wore weathered hiking clothes from decades past, while others looked as though they had disappeared only days ago. Their faces were drained of color, their eyes empty, yet none of them appeared hostile. Instead, they carried the same unbearable sadness, as if they had spent years trying to warn anyone who wandered into this place. The towering shadow remained perfectly still behind them. It had never chased them. It had never attacked. It had simply waited. Waiting for curiosity to do what violence never could. Ethan finally understood the legend. The creature did not hunt people. It tempted them. Every missing hiker, every unexplained disappearance, every forgotten name carved into the trees had begun with the same mistake, the irresistible desire to see what no human was ever meant to witness. The heartbeat beneath the mountain slowed. Thump. Silence. Thump. Silence. Then, one by one, the trapped souls stepped aside, opening a narrow path through the circle. Beyond them, the darkness began to dissolve. The familiar outline of the forest slowly returned. Moonlight filtered through the trees once more, and for the first time in hours, the wind carried the sound of insects back into the night. The towering figure lowered its head again. Without a sound, it began to drift backward into the fog. Its enormous form faded little by little until nothing remained but darkness between the trees. Then, it was gone. None of the four friends spoke. They walked. They did not run. They followed the narrow opening through the forest until, just before dawn, they stumbled onto the main trail. A team of park rangers found them only a few hundred yards from the parking area. The rangers said they had been searching throughout the night after discovering the group's abandoned vehicle. When Ethan tried to explain what had happened, the oldest ranger quietly interrupted him. "You saw the fog," the man said. Ethan nodded. The ranger looked toward the mountain for a long moment before speaking again. "Then you're lucky." "Lucky?" Ryan asked. The old ranger sighed. "Because you're still four." None of them understood what he meant. Not until Ryan unpacked his camera later that afternoon. The memory card was completely blank. Every photograph, every video, every recording, gone. Except for a single image. It showed the four of them standing around their campfire. Behind them stood the towering shadow, its face hidden as always. But something else appeared in the photograph. Standing among the trees, watching from the darkness, were dozens of silent figures. One of them was the middle-aged hiker with the torn backpack. Another wore clothing from the 1980s. Another from the 1990s. And at the very edge of the image, barely visible through the fog, stood four new silhouettes. Their faces could not be seen. Yet their clothing was unmistakable. One wore Ethan's jacket. One carried Ryan's backpack. One stood with Maya's flashlight hanging at her side. The last wore Lucas's hiking cap. The timestamp on the photograph read, October 17, 2020. Exactly 1 year after the night they had escaped. No one ever returned to Blood Mountain. The four friends never spoke publicly about what they had seen, and within a few years they drifted apart, each trying to bury the memory beneath ordinary life. Yet every autumn, when the nights grew colder and the first heavy fog rolled over the mountains of northern Georgia, each of them would wake at precisely 2:17 in the morning. Not because of a nightmare. But because they all heard the same sound outside their windows. One slow, heavy footstep, then another. Always stopping just beyond the light. Always waiting. As though the mountain had never truly let them leave. Perhaps the old legends were never meant to explain what lives on Blood Mountain. Perhaps they were only meant to remind us that some places are older than memory, and that certain mysteries survive because no one who learns the truth is ever truly free from it. So if you ever find yourself hiking through a mountain where the forest suddenly falls silent, where the fog seems to move against the wind, and where you notice a shadow gliding between the trees without making a single sound, do yourself one favor. Do not follow it. Do not call out to it. And whatever happens, never try to see its face.